it's George Masri. I'm here with Sarah Larbi, and I recently met her at an investment event, so I just figured she'd be a great person to interview because we're pretty close in age. She's a millennial, she's an investor, she's got a bunch of properties, so I thought that maybe some people can benefit from learning about your story, what you've done, and maybe you can inspire others. Mm-hmm. So maybe you can just start off by kind of saying a little bit about yourself, talk about where you came from Quebec, and when you moved here and all that stuff.
Okay, awesome. Hi guys. I'm really excited. Thank you very much for inviting me on the show. So just a little bit about my background. I was born in Montreal, but I grew up in Toronto. And about 8 years ago, I moved to Oakville. So I am still working full time, and I decided to invest for cash flow. And I remember a little while back, and I had nothing to my name, and fast forward just a few years and closing on number 9 next month, so really excited about that. Currently I'm living in Oakville. What else would you like to know?
Okay, so you said that you're a cash flow investor.
I am, yeah.
So that's your strategy. You go in, you buy properties. I don't know if you repair them, renovate, and then you rent them out and try to maybe build a portfolio where you're cash flowing 200-300 from each property. Is that sort of right?
Yeah, so originally the Brantford market, so Brantford, I don't know if you probably know this, but I'm not sure if the listeners know, it was actually voted the number 1 best place to buy real estate for 2018. And I've been investing in Brantford for a few years now, so since 2013. Originally, the prices of the single family houses were around, 150, 160, 170. And they were fairly turnkey, and I can actually turn those around and rent it for $1,300, $1,400, $1,500. And then things, started heating up. Hamilton's getting more and more pricey. Things are trickling down. In Brantford now, in order to really get the cash flow, it is going to require a little bit more work, I think, than just something that was turnkey. The last couple properties, we did put a little bit of work into them. One of them I purchased in, just to give you an example, 2016 in December. We ended up renting it right away, but it needed work. It was dated. Tenants wanted to move in, so that was rented for $1,295. Tenants ended up breaking up in September, so just a few months after, and we wanted to renovate it anyways to get it reappraised and refinanced. And so we put in about $30,000 when they did leave, and then got that reappraised from from $151 to $275 in a matter of a year. So there's definitely still opportunity in Brantford. There's still opportunity to be a cash flow investor. I think the cash flow maybe just isn't as good as it was even just a few years back, but there's definitely still cash flow. And so I think, when you look around in the market currently, you could still get something decent for about $250. That is fairly turnkey, and rent that if you're getting like a 3-4 bedroom house for about $1,600 a month. I've got one that's closing May 15th, so I purchased that for $220. We are actually planning on flipping it and just doing a YouTube show. It's going to be called Rich Millennial, Poor Millennial with Sarah Eder. Yep. And we just want to show people, what investors do and just the day-to-day, everyday life. And it's not that hard. So I think once you have your team set up, you've got a good contractor, you've got a good handyman, et cetera, it definitely becomes a lot easier because I'm not the one that's going to be going there swinging those hammers.
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So are you mostly investing in single family homes, or are you kind of working on second suites or maybe triplexes, fourplexes?
So right now they're all single family homes, and I'm open to potentially multifamily. In Brantford, I'm not super excited about the duplexes or the triplexes. I think just for the potential, increase or the amount of more that you could get in rent, it's very minimal. One of the things I look for is just supply and demand. And in Brantford, when I look at certain things, like for example, like Laurier University, right? So they started in 2008, 2009 with a handful of students. Now they're about 4,000 students. And then in the next 4 or 5 years, they're actually going to be expanding about to 15,000. So a lot of the investors that are going into Brantford are buying like the 4 or 5 bedroom houses. And so they're renting it by the room and making a little bit more. And then I just decided to say, well, where's that supply and demand? And it's in those 3 to 4 bedroom houses, and I can get a fairly good rent. And also have my pick of 10, 15 different potential families that are very, very good and good renters. So for me, with a full-time job and just trying to keep it as simple as possible, it's worked out well. Definitely there's some opportunity if I can find a great multifamily property. I'm always looking for those, but in the meantime, I'm not going to wait 3-4 years for that great multifamily property to come when I can just buy a few more houses and still be further ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned something about finding great tenants.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I'm finding in Hamilton is that depending on where you are, there's a lot of people that are on ODSB or they just don't have good credit. They're not working. They're working cash jobs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's hard to find good tenants in certain areas. Do you find that that's the same in Brantford, or do you find that it's pretty easy to find like someone who's got all the qualifications that you're looking for a good tenant?
So I think in Brantford, there are some areas that are definitely better than others. Personally, I look at the school zones, and you can probably Google them and just figure out what the school zone ratings are. I stay away from downtown. I mean, if you're going to invest in student rental properties, there's no problem with that. But I look at my tenant profile and who I want, and everyone's going to be different, right? So for me, I just want the families, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a husband and wife but it's a family with kids that are looking for potentially 3-4 bedrooms. A lot of them don't want to be right downtown because that's where a lot of the more of the drugs are, more of the crime is. So I really try to focus into certain areas. So for example, like Eagle Place is something I really like. The values are really good and the tenants are still decent. I had no issues. Homedale is also good. West Brant, Old West Brant, Terrace Hill. So I stay within those areas. North End is awesome, but it's definitely more expensive, so you're not going to cash flow as well. But I mean, there's good and bad areas in every town, and in Brantford particularly, for me, for what I look for, I just don't buy downtown. Right.
And how long does it take you to typically fill a vacancy with a good tenant?
Yeah, so it's funny because how I got started is so my boyfriend originally he's on board now, but originally he just did not want to be an investor, and so I actually had to push him for a couple of years to tell him how good this is going to be, how it's going to change our life, and it really, really does change your life. And our first tenant was actually his sister because she needed a place to live closer to her daughter's school, and that's actually how we got started. Otherwise, we'd probably still be fighting over it. And so she was house shopping with us. We knew what her budget was, and then we picked a little tiny house. It was like $129,000 back in 2013, and then we had her ready to go. And then because of the fact that he was just a little bit more concerned about having a tenant that doesn't pay or a tenant that's going to completely trash your property, I became very careful with my selection, and I ended up actually finding my tenants beforehand. So for example, the second property, I said, okay, I think we're ready to buy the second property. It was a year later. And I found the tenant on Kijiji. We ended up actually talking for 3 months, really liked her, got to know them fairly well, and understood what her budget was. And then based on that, I said, okay, well, why don't we find a place that we both like and you can move into it. And so we ended up I found 2 houses that I really liked, and I said, hey, do you want to come and check these out and let me know which one you like better? And I think it's that opportunity that we gave them. They're like the best tenants ever, and they're still there, and treat the property like it is their home. And so with the third tenant, we ended up trying to do something similar as well. And as the market started heating up, it gets harder and harder. So one of the things that I would recommend, your listeners to do is when you're buying a property, if they're buying a property with you, for example, ask for 4 showings. And what I do is I use 2 or 3 of those to actually screen tenants and have them come through. Well, after I pre-screen them on the phone, I use 3 of those showings to actually show the property. And so house number 4, 5, 6, etc., I was able to actually fill by having the showings beforehand. And when the house closes, they're moving in a couple days later.
Nice.
And you can do all that due diligence prior. Because why waste time, right?
Yeah,
if you close on a property and then you start advertising and then you start looking for a tenant, you've wasted a whole month for nothing.
Right. So are you still doing that today, where you're finding tenants kind of before you buy a property and then maybe trying to set them up with something they like?
So that part, not so much anymore, just because it's harder to find a deal now. So what I'll do is I'll find the deal, and once I remove the conditions and I start advertising for it, and clearly I would have asked for 4 showings to begin with, and then I start advertising. I use the pictures, post it on Kijiji, and then from there I get the interested tenants. And usually I close on a property maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks after I firm it up and make the offer, it still gives us enough time to find the tenants. Mm-hmm. So the house has been purchased. We're just now, after we remove the conditions, looking for the tenants.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Nice. And so kind of to switch things up a little bit, to talk about when you first started, maybe what inspired you to start investing and what inspires you today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I remember going to the bank, and it was probably like 2010 or something along those lines, and had been working for a little while. And the bank financial advisor, whatever you call them, she was going through our assets and our liabilities with us and just doing her job. And I realized that we had no assets. All we had were liabilities, which I thought were assets back in the day, like cars and stuff. And it was actually really embarrassing for me. So I went home that weekend and decided to Google how to become wealthy and how to become rich. And it's not all about money for sure, but it definitely helps when you have that. You have more options and you have more choices with it. And real estate just kept coming back over and over and over. I mean, stocks were there as well, and starting businesses were there as well. But real estate just seemed like the easiest thing to do for whatever reason. And I just started learning, and then I said, let's just do it. And I think one of the biggest things that helped me is, that analysis paralysis hurts people from taking action. And, my personality, and I've been like this, and sometimes it's to my detriment, where I say, I'm just going to learn enough and I'm just going to go ahead and do it and learn from those mistakes, right? And there were mistakes that were made in the beginning, but I think that action taking and pressing that go button has helped me tremendously to get to where I am today. What inspires me, I think, is just the ability to really change your life, but those around you as well, and to be able to be happy and do what you want to do when you want to do it with who you want to do it. I mean, that's the rock star, your life, your terms type of motto.
Right.
And you've got one life, so how can I make it the best that I can, and how can I help others along the way?
That's awesome. So did you at any point, because you've got 9 properties now, or you're closing on your 9th, did you at any point feel like you were just moving too fast? Maybe you were just too highly leveraged, you were borrowing too much off this house, home equity line of credit, refinancing, whatever. Did that ever occur to you?
No, not really. And the reason is that I think one of the advice that I would recommend that people do is really get to know a market, right? So for me, I decided to stay in Brantford, and there were some fundamentals that I really liked in Brantford. But what that did was that it allowed me to really understand what a good deal was and what was not, and to be super highly focused. And so some of the properties I was able to buy in a matter of a couple hours, sight unseen, you build your team, you've got your realtor going. And I think it's the biggest thing that has helped, because I've been able to buy under market because of that. And so when you buy under market, you've got instant equity. And you're not always buying under market, but you'll get those listings, you'll get those opportunities. And I think that's helped. And then the other piece is, I invest for cash flow. So I'm not a speculator. I'm not investing in something that's going to cost me money to have a tenant live there every single month. I'm making sure that the rent covers everything. And so when I am borrowing equity from one property, as an example, to pay towards the down payment, if you're borrowing $50,000 from your home equity line of credit on another property, well, you got to factor in that payment into your cash flow. And I think that being able to do that and really focusing on the cash flow has made it very comfortable. These properties in Brantford, I mean, the most expensive one has been $238 so far, and these are renting for $1,500-$1,600. So I'm not buying multi-million-dollar properties or $600,000 properties, and so I don't think, for me, the risk is not there. There's always risk in everything, but I definitely don't lose sleep over it.
Right. Are you finding these properties through your realtor, or are you finding your own? Because I think you mentioned to me that you're doing some door knocking and stuff like that. So can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So most of them have been on MLS, and as Brantford has heated up, it's definitely getting harder to find properties the regular way, right, through MLS and through your realtors. I think if you have a really good relationship with a realtor, you'll get some opportunities before they list it. And so recently Sarah Eater, who is also an investor, and I decided that we want to try to provide as much knowledge, and so we wanted to create this show and find a house that we want to flip together. And so we ended up just going door to door. We have some letters. We ended up actually having some calls from those letters. We just find some distressed looking houses and we try to figure out, who the owners are, and go from there. And then there's also, all my properties. There's some neighbors that will actually call me and say, hey, this house is going up for sale, or this person is getting divorced, and then you'll get tipped out that way as well. So there's definitely lots of ways. I mean, I don't think, it's as easy as it was in the US if you want to just pull lists because of the Canadian, rules and regulations here. But, MLS is still good. But think outside the box as well. Like, don't just rely on one be-all and end-all type of thing, right?
Cool. So I want to talk to you a bit about Sarah Eater as well.
Yeah.
Although she probably doesn't know we're going to talk about her. But,
Sorry.
So how did you connect with her in the first place? And then also, because I've heard from different people that who you choose to partner with in real estate is really important. You got to be really careful. So how did you figure out that she'd be a good partner for you? And if you can just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm really big on networking, and I have been approached by a few people about partnering up and doing joint ventures. And if I don't really know you at this point in time, here's the thing: at this point in time, I wasn't looking for a joint venture, right? I still have my equity, I still have money, I still have financing ability. So my joint venture ideal partner may not be an ideal partner for someone else. But what I really saw is that, for example, Sarah, we have the So Right Club. I'm a founder of it, and Sarah kept coming back, and she was participating, she was engaged, she had a great, way of investing using other people's money that I hadn't done yet. And she ended up reaching out to me. She had found this property in Brantford and said, hey, do you know who might be interested in partnering up? Because I need the money for the renovations. I have the private lender, but I need somebody to help me out. And I said, why don't we look at doing something together? I'm not interested in that particular property because I was not super excited about where it was location-wise. But if you're looking for a partner, I know you've done it before, I've done it before, we know we see each other quite frequently because we're networking, let's do something. And I think that we both have the same goals, and we also both have the goal of wanting to educate other people. And so we just said, let's just do it. And so we were looking for some properties. We lost out on a couple that we had made offers on before, and it just has 5 other offers. And as we're doing this as a flip property, we got to make sure that our purchase price is low enough to make sure that we have profit at the end. So yeah, it's fun. And I'm also a very big proponent of women in this industry. There's not a lot of women that are doing it, and there's also not a lot of women millennials that are doing it. And so I looked at her and I'm like, you're very similar to me in a way, and so why don't we create something and make it fun and see what can come out of it.
So there you go. I was actually about to ask you about that. So you just mentioned it. You're a millennial. You're a female investor. Has that been challenging for you, or has that been kind of like something that's motivated you to because the industry is kind of dominated by men for the most part. So do you ever feel like you want to prove that women can do it and they can be better than men? So I think, I haven't had any issues with it. I think you just have to stand your ground and. People, it's 2018. I think what I really want to do is to show people that and motivate them that they can do it and they can get themselves out of whatever, men or women. And, I really want to help millennials and other young people to be able to say, it's not all lost, right? If you live in Toronto and you're renting in Toronto, there's some options that you can think of outside the box that can really change your life. So I think it's more about young folks and millennials to be able to encourage them and say, this is possible. Women, I think ultimately, maybe just in the times, I don't feel like, oh, I'm a woman, so I get treated differently. I think you just have to treat everyone the same and treat people like how you want to be treated, and you hope for the best back in return, right? And then if not, you stand your ground again. Yeah. So is it the same when it comes to the contractors that you deal with, whoever else is part of the staff? Do you feel like they respect you equally regardless of whether you're a man or a woman?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess the next thing I'll ask you is, I think there's this kind of conception that if you start investing, you're gonna pretty much put all of your money into these deals. So maybe people are afraid that they're gonna have to give up vacations and clothes and going out to restaurants and stuff. Did you feel like you had to give everything up in order to become as involved as you are in investing?
So that's a really good question. So there were sacrifices, and there were sacrifices in the beginning. And I have, a couple years when I used to work at another company, and I used to cash out my vacations to try to save for that first down payment. So for sure there's sacrifices. Like, you can't expect to not change anything and all of a sudden have more money to be able to invest. So the sacrifices are short-lived, but there were. And I think, in terms of clothes, in terms of this, and in terms of that, I personally don't feel like I need that stuff. So I've never cared so much about clothes and shoes. Like, I literally have one pair of boots for winter. Like, you'll probably you see me with these every day, and that's okay. But I think that's just more what I want or what I need, or what I don't want or I don't need. And I think that people should make some sacrifices and understand that there are some to make, but also understand that you are doing that today so that you can live on your terms in 5 years from now. And it doesn't take that long. And at some point, if you buy right and you buy on cash flow, don't worry about appreciation so much, but if you buy on cash flow and you get that mortgage paid down by your tenant, which is about 5 to 6% a year on your money, you will realize that in 4 or 5 years, you're going to be in a whole different situation, and it really is going to have been worth it. So yes, make some sacrifices, do it, and then just know that it's temporary.
Quick in-between question. When was the last time you went on vacation?
We went to Jamaica in November.
Okay.
We ended up, my spouse's parents, they have never been on a vacation in their whole lives. Okay. And so his dad has helped us tremendously for the properties, and really has helped us be able to do all the handyman work and that kind of stuff. And we wanted to reward them. And so we took them on their first vacation, all inclusive, in Jamaica. The 4 of us went in November, which was awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
There you go. So you're already sort of living life on your terms in some
absolutely.
ways. Yeah. Okay. So what's your vision for your business, for the properties that you own? Do you plan on possibly building that cash flow to a point where you can just live off of it, or what do you envision for yourself?
Yeah. So I'm looking at replacing my income, and it's even in 5 years, like it's definitely a big difference from 5 years ago. So I hate winter. If for those of you that know me, you know that I don't do well in the cold. So I really want to be somewhere else for 6 months and not have to deal with another winter day ever again. So I also know that I have one life and that I want to live it, and I want to have that freedom to do what I want, when I want, where I want, etc. And so that is the goal for me to invest, is to be able to replace my income so that I can free myself and my time.
Right. There you go. That's awesome. So you think you'll be able to do that in the next 5 years?
About 5 to 7 years. If we keep going the route that we're going and doing the cash flow. And I think the other piece of it is some of the BRRR deals that we're starting to do. So you buy, you renovate, you rent, and you refinance. And that is really how you can do it quickly or faster, and in combination with some flips. Of course, the long-term wealth strategy is buy and hold for cash flow. How to accelerate that? You need to be doing some BRRs, you need to be doing some flips. You can buy some multifamilies if you can find them. And yeah, it's the goal, right? It's I don't want to be retiring at 65.
Right. You want to retire earlier.
I do.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So are you trying to pay down a certain percent of each home that you own, let's say to get to like 50% loan to value or whatever, or you're keeping it at 20%, just constantly withdrawing equity and buying more? Yeah.
So I like the cash flow. So I'm not concerned if I have a mortgage and it's not being paid down right away. Like, that's not my strategy right now. It is to just acquire as many as possible. So I also would recommend that whoever's listening, don't over leverage, right? So even though we refinance, we just have lines of credit. So we're not necessarily using those lines of credits, right? We're just keeping them because the best time to ask for money is when you don't need it. And I don't recommend that people over leverage themselves, or to the extent that they can't have any equity other than the 20% that's they have to keep in. So But it is important to refinance when you've got some good equity, and even just have it there ready if you need it for whatever reason. Just, be diligent and understand that it's not your vacation money, and understand that it's not your shoe money or whatever it is that you want to buy. Like, it's, investment money for more cash flowing assets when the time is right.
Great. And do you have any other advice for young investors? Maybe they're just starting, or they're really early in their careers?
Yeah, I think that when people are looking at real estate investing, sometimes they think that they're going to quit their jobs tomorrow. And my advice is don't quit your job tomorrow. Banks will look at that. And if you're buying multifamily properties, 7 units plus, or your commercial mortgages, it's not a big deal. But if you're looking at residential mortgages, if you don't have a job, it's a lot harder. So keep your job as you're acquiring the properties until you really, realize that you don't need it anymore. Because as soon as you don't have one, you're gonna really, really struggle and get financing. Mm-hmm. So that would be my one advice: is do it on the side, do it, after work, during weekends, do that kind of stuff. Learn, educate yourself, but don't be too quick to say I quit. And the other piece of advice is, you don't need to buy your house as your first property. Buy an investment property. And so if you're living in Mississauga or Burlington or Toronto, and you're like, I'm never going to be able to afford a house here, well, just keep renting and go out a couple hours and pick a market that you think has some good fundamentals and invest there. And then you can use that cash flow to offset your rent, as an example. But there's just different ways that you can think outside the box.
Right. Cool. That's good advice. So in terms of your podcast, so can you tell us why you started a podcast, and then also how that might be helping your business today?
Yeah. So, how and why I started a podcast. So I don't know if you were at the Wealth Forum with Tony Robbins and Pitbull last year. There was a guy there that was talking about podcasting. And one of the things that I do is I go to something and I take action on it. So after that class, I signed up for his course, did the online modules, and then I said, let's go for it and let's see what happens. And I do truly believe that investors that are successful will help you, and they'll give back. And that's one of the things I want to do, is I want to be able to help others, to be able to create that easy way to learn. And so I listened to a lot of podcasts. I mean, that's how I got a lot of my education, as I was driving to work, from work, etc. And it really, truly changed my life. And so I want to be a contributor to that.
Cool. Can you tell us maybe one or two podcasts that you listened to that have really helped you?
Yeah, so I think the one that I really listened to back in the day was Bigger Pockets. Even though it's American, it has some really, really great contents. That was one of them. I know Erwin Zito's got a podcast I listen to as Canadian content. And then, there's like Old Dogs REI in the US. So a lot of the US ones, and I ended up finding some Canadian ones. I know Rob Brake and Sandy McKay also have one, Breakthrough Real Estate Investing. Yeah. Those are all great opportunities to learn and to educate yourself. And I mean, I probably have a list of 20 of them, but I would say those are probably the top 4.
Mm-hmm. So are you mostly focusing on just real estate in terms of your education, or are you also maybe reading about personal growth, listening to other podcasts and things that are not necessarily related to real estate?
Yeah, I really like Pat Flynn's Passive Income podcast, and he interviews a lot of entrepreneurs and how they've created passive income. So I like that. And Tim Ferriss has one as well. It's really good. And I know that the Rain recently has a podcast, and some of it's real estate, some of it's also growth and mastery and all that good stuff. But I always believe that you should keep growing and being productive, and real estate's a small portion of it. So reading books. I just actually hired a branding and strategy coach as well. That's helping me with the branding piece of things. Just because a year ago I didn't even have business cards or a website or anything. Yeah. And so it's important to be well-rounded, and it's important that you look at your blind spots as well, right? Mm-hmm. So if you need some help on negotiation, maybe just look at a podcast that can talk about that, or productivity, or just anything. Mm-hmm. There's tons of stuff out there, tons of content.
Sure. For sure. Okay, so maybe just one last question. What have been some of your biggest challenges?
The biggest challenge, I mean, I don't think it's a challenge, but a couple mistakes that I think we've made in the beginning. So, of course, getting him on board in the first place was challenging, but you know, he's very good now. One of the biggest mistakes I think we made in the beginning was using a realtor that was from Oakville to help us in Brantford,
Right.
and that just, you know, for many reasons, that just doesn't work. And then the other piece that we did in the beginning was that we went to a bank, so one of the big banks that we were already with in banking and had our checkings account, and then got them to help us with the mortgages for the rental properties. And the problem with that is that there is something called the financing wall, and if you don't strategically pick who your lenders are going to be and in what order based on your goals, if you just want one or two, it doesn't matter. But if you're looking at actually scaling, you need to do it very strategically. So we just went to the bank and we asked for a mortgage, and they said, okay, well, you know, like, no problem. You've got your sister moving into this rental property. It's going to be 20% down. Fine. We went back for the second rental, and they told us that it was 25% down because it's their second rental. So we didn't know any better at the time. Said, okay, no problem. Here's 25%, and it's money. Like, you know, you don't have to spend it. Don't spend it. But that was still 5% more. And then we went for the third rental, and they're like, okay, well, you know, this is going to be 35% down because now you've got 3 rentals. And I said, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why am I putting 35% down? And I'm hearing a lot of other people putting 20% down. And so we ended up meeting our mortgage broker, Dalia Barsoom, you might know her, and she had to, you know, undo our mess that we created and properly position us so that we're still able, right now we're still qualifying with A lenders, which is awesome. And so that would be the first thing I would recommend that people do, is rather than going to a bank, work with your mortgage broker. Like, they don't cost anything. The bank ends up paying them anyways, but they're going to really be able to help you scale properly. And if we would have just gone to the bank, we would have been stopped at 3 or 4.
Yeah, for sure. And it's the same thing with home equity lines of credit. So, for example, for me, I know that with the lender that I'm working with, it's an A lender, but in order to qualify for a HELOC, you need to have a certain amount of cash in your account. So other banks, it's not the same. You don't have to have any money in your account as long as the ratios make sense and it works. So for sure, that's a big piece.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that these rules and these things that the bank wants you to do, it always changes. And so it was going to be so much easier. It's so much easier to have like a professional that's doing it for their, you know, day-to-day job, to be able to follow all of these changes, because there's a lot of changes right now, than for you to try to figure out, you know, all of these banks and all of these trust companies and everything that is happening and all the changes that they're doing for what's the next best option, right? So yes, definitely a mortgage broker, but also a realtor that is local, and also an investor too, right? Because if you're working with a realtor that's local but they have no idea about anything investing related, you know, because they're your brother or they're your brother's friend or whatever it is, that's bad news too.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you say that you need to have a team of investment specialists.
Yeah.
Everyone on your team has to like specialize in investment properties.
Absolutely.
Right, to be successful. Okay.
Even your lawyer, your lawyer should be real estate specific. Your accountant should be real estate specific. Your mortgage broker clearly as well. Contractors, yes and no. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, they may or may not have rental properties themselves or investment properties, but as long as you know, they're you know, decent price, good value, work hard, you can trust them, then I think that's, you know, that's good. Yeah, because not all of them are investors.
Right. I meant like they probably should have worked on a few investment properties in the past, at least, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like to ask random questions. People always tell me that. So I just got, I'm going to call it the random 5. And then these are just quick questions, so you can just answer them. First thing that comes to mind.
Got it.
Who's your favorite artist?
Gwen Stefani.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. You know what? Actually, no. Wait. Bruno Mars has this song. And it's like the one song I listen to because I don't listen to the radio. I listen to podcasts. And it's called Billionaire.
Okay.
And I listen to that like 5 times a day. I know it's a little crazy, but when I get home, I get Alexa to turn it on.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't listen to music. I know I'm weird.
Yeah, neither do I. Well, I don't listen to a lot either, but that's really cool. I've never heard someone say Gwen Stefani then Bruno Mars. But anyways, what's your best childhood memory?
Probably just spending time at the cottage when I was a kid, or going to visit my grandparents in Florida.
Cool.
Yeah.
Where was your cottage?
Quebec.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. What's your favorite meal?
I really like sushi, and I really like just trying different foods, to be honest. There's not like one thing that I would say this is my favorite, but I would say if I had a favorite type of cuisine, probably Japanese.
Okay. So if you had to eat something every day, it would be either sushi or Japanese food of some sort?
Yeah, like raw fish or something.
Yeah? Okay. Nice. Who's your favorite professional speaker?
Probably Tony Robbins.
Okay.
I don't know if I love the rah-rah part of it, but he is very motivational and a very good speaker. So I really like watching him and listening to him.
Do you listen to his podcast?
I do.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay. What has been the most influential book for you?
That's a good question. Probably The 4-Hour Workweek. Have read that? No. Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek. So how to, create that freedom is all ties in. And actually, just this past week, I hired a virtual assistant. And one of the things in his book was talking about that. And she is actually helping me with editing all my podcasts. And cool. I just gave her that one task of just finding guests, having me on other people's podcasts, and just reaching out and then editing all my podcasts and posting it, because I looked at my time. I don't have a lot of time, and that was the piece that I was spending a lot of time on, is editing it and getting everything ready. So I said, let's hire somebody and have them do it. Nice. So we'll see how it works out. We just started.
Cool. Where is she based out of?
Philippines.
Philippines.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, so that's it. That's the 5 questions.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just to finish things off, if you want to just tell everyone how they can reach you and what services you might offer and how you can possibly help them.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys can reach me through my website. It's sarahlarbi.com. So SARAHLARBI.com. You guys can email me as well, which is sarah@sarahlarbi.com. And I do coaching, so if you guys are interested in coaching, it could be just a 1-hour session, or it could be ongoing coaching. If you are interested in knowing more about the podcast, or even coming to So Right, Southern Ontario Real Estate Investing Training Club, it's a monthly club that we have real estate specific topics every single month. You were there just this week. Harry Fine was there. It was a great event, talking about the new standard lease and what we should be aware of. And so every single month it's something different. So if you guys are interested in coming, definitely let me know. And we also have a website for So Right coming soon, or you guys can check out the Facebook page as well.
So in the meantime, if they want to register for an event, how would they do that?
Yeah, so it's on Eventbrite. So if they just go to Eventbrite and then they just type in So Right, SO space REIT Club, it will come up for the May and June event. So May is May 24th, and then the June event is June 19th.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So is there anything you want to add before we finish things off?
I think that you guys are doing the right thing by already listening to these types of videos and educating yourselves. Educate yourself enough and then just go and take action, because you don't want to be looking back at it 10 years from now and saying, oh, the market wasn't right, or I did this and I did that, because things are still going to change. Things are always going to change. There's never a good time to do it. But in 10 years, no matter what you do, if you buy for cash flow, you're going to be so much further ahead. So take some action after you learn enough.
Great. Okay, so thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.